Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Joy in Dementia. My name is Laura Smothers-Chu, and I am the CEO and founder of Befriended Heart, where I help daughters navigate their parents' dementia. And my dad is in the late stage of dementia, and I am bringing on a really dear friend of mine who is also an expert in the dementia field. Her name is Natali Edmonds, and she is the creator of Careblazers, which is an awesome YouTube channel. She has a website and a survival guide on her website, which I will link later, below, but we'll talk about a little bit later. But Natali resides in Phoenix, Arizona. She has worked with a ton of caregivers as a geropsychologist, helping them manage the challenges of dementia. And Natali was also a mentor of mine too. So we met right when I was launching Befriended Heart, and I reached out to her. And so she's been so helpful in my professional journey as well as my personal journey with my family. So Natali, welcome to Joy in Dementia. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
Me too. So can you tell us a little more about yourself and your expertise?
So I am a clinical psychologist, which means I have a doctorate degree in clinical psychology, and I specialized in geriatrics, and I went on to get board certified in geropsychology, which is just a complicated way to say I specialize in geriatrics and specifically in helping family members manage all the challenges that come along with caring for a loved one with dementia.
Awesome. And Natali, do you have personal experience with dementia?
So my primary experience in working with dementia is just from the last 11 years of working in a large hospital setting and specializing in dementia. So I got my start actually working in an assessment clinic where I would do the testing. So I would assess people and give the testing to determine whether or not somebody had dementia. And so that's really how I started Careblazers. Is I was a part of this really amazing clinic. Great geriatric care is always interdisciplinary with geriatrician, physical therapist, social work, dietitian, psychology, all of us came together and we'd all do our assessment. We'd all give them the final diagnosis of what we thought was going on, all of our recommendations, and then we'd send the person and their family away. And then we were done. And although we did a great job with assessment, I just couldn't help but realize we're sending away a person and a family to deal with a disease that can last decades, and a disease that's just going to get worse with time. And so I was thinking, oh my gosh, what can we do to help? And so a lot of times the caregivers would have questions or call the clinic or want to come back. And it was really hard. I didn't feel like we were doing the family members justice. So I started I would have follow-up appointments with the main caregivers or family members to talk about how to navigate the challenges. But then that requires them leaving their loved one and coming to the hospital and taking all that time. And if there's anything busy caregivers don't have is a lot of time and ability to leave their loved one with dementia for extended periods of time, right? So
Right.
now maybe support groups, right? So it's well, then that still requires them to leave their loved ones or to take that time and to battle the traffic. And I just thought there has to be a better way to give great dementia care. We can't just focus on the person with dementia. We have to focus on the family members who are caring for them. And so over the past 11 years, it just became more and more of a passion of mine that we needed to fill the gap and start paying attention to the people who are really managing the bulk of dementia care, and that's family.
Totally. And I completely agree with you, Natali, in the sense that it's the healthcare industry feels like they've done their job once they diagnose the issue,
Right.
And then the burden falls completely on the family to figure out what to do.
Absolutely. Once the diagnosis happens, it's that's not the end. That is the beginning of a really long journey. And in order to help the families as much as possible, we need to be there to support them, help them realize they're not going crazy, what's to expect, and help them connect with other people who are going through similar situations so they know they're not alone.
Exactly. So I want to talk to you today about the assessment, because I think that is sort of, you said, the beginning of the dementia journey. Let's talk about the steps in how to get that assessment, whether the forgetful parent is in the early stages, the middle stages, or the late stages. And I know the late stages is a little tougher to tease things out, but I think it's really important to get that as much information as you can. So can you talk about sort of the first step of where people go or what they do in order to start to get that assessment?
Okay. So one of the first steps that you can do, which is kind of how a lot of the majority of people kind of come to get that formal diagnosis, is your parent with dementia has a primary care provider, whether it's like a general practitioner or a geriatrician. They have somebody that they've maybe been checking in with, whether it's yearly, every 6 months, whatever the case may be. That's like the first place to go. That's the first place. The actual provider might already be noticing the changes themselves, because if they've been following for a while, they can see the changes. But that's where the family member can bring up to the primary care provider, hey, I'm noticing some changes, or hey, I'm really concerned about their thinking, or I'm really wondering, is this normal for their age, or is something going on? So the first step is just like going to that provider that they've been working with, their PCP. Mm-hmm. That PCP can choose to do several things. That they could choose to give a mini screening, like just a snapshot on how that person's thinking is. Some common test screening measures are things called like the MOCA, the SLUMS, or the mini mental status examination. Those are screening measures that can be done really quickly in a primary care outpatient setting. And it's meant to give it's just a screening, just a snapshot, just to raise red flags. Is there anything unusual going on here? Should we follow up more? It's not meant to be a diagnostic tool. Because it's such a short screening measure, if somebody pops up and something's unusual on that testing, it could be from a whole variety of things, not necessarily just dementia. So when somebody doesn't perform well on one of these screening measures, typically what happens is that PCP will then refer to a specialist, like a neuropsychologist. So a neuropsychologist is somebody who specializes in brain behavior, and they do formal neuropsychological testing. It's like more in-depth testing where they can really figure out, is this person's brain functioning the way that it should for that person's age and education level? And so it's more in-depth, it takes more time. And so that would be like the second step. Mm-hmm. Very helpful when you catch somebody's thinking problems in the very beginning to middle, early to middle stages. When somebody gets severe, their impairment is so severe, what happens is it means they've probably had issues for years and years and years. And the testing is going to be really extremely hard for that person with dementia. And the testing is not going to reveal much. Everything's going to be impaired because they're so severe. So you want to try to catch it as early as possible whenever you start to notice some changes in thinking. And it might be that everything looks normal, or it might be that there's just mild changes that now your doctor knows, or your parents' doctor knows, let's keep an eye on this. And maybe in a year, we'll follow up again and test. And then what's cool about that is they can compare, okay, last year you were in the average range on all of these measures, and now we're starting to see some low average and borderline impaired range in these areas. So I guess to summarize, in terms of the steps to take, the first step would be going to the PCP, the person who's already familiar with your parent, letting them know some of your concerns. That PCP will then choose maybe to give a screening themselves. And then based on that screening, might refer to a neuropsychologist or might not. If your parent did fine on that screening measure, the PCP might say, let's just keep an eye on this, right? Or they might refer. The PCP can also, which should be, when we're talking about a dementia diagnosis, order different lab tests just to make everything. There's so many things that can look like dementia that's not dementia. And so the PCP is a really good first stop too. So they can check for vitamin deficiencies, make sure everything's good there, make sure their hearing is okay, right? Because poor hearing can look like memory impairment if information's not getting in. So we don't jump to that neuropsych exam. we start with the PCP.
Yes. And I think, so it's funny because my family did a little bit differently where we weren't ready to kind of talk to the PCP about it. And I think some daughters come to me too, and they just say, you know, the PCP just refuses to do an assessment and like doesn't see symptoms of dementia, but they're not actually testing. So what do I do in that situation? And I talk about, you know, the importance of getting a second opinion sometimes. I think sometimes we get stuck in going to this doctor all the time, and our parents really like that doctor, but it is also important to have someone else's perspective, because I feel like we know, Natali, that the healthcare industry, as far as dementia is concerned, is that it's not a perfect science, and that there's some, you know, bias and opinions that come in for each doctor.
Right. So don't ever hesitate if you feel like you want a second opinion, to get a second opinion. And it's okay if the PCP doesn't want to do an assessment. That's not technically what most PCPs do. If anything, it's going to be that little screener. But you can just ask, like, can I have a referral for an assessment? You know, so even if they don't, you know, they might say, I don't really see anything here. I think it's a waste of time. But you can say, but we would really like that peace of mind. We would really like this assessment. Can we have a referral? Or if your insurance plan allows you to go directly to a neuropsychologist without having to get the referral, you're more than welcome to do that as well. In the end, like, this is a really good message, actually. Like, nobody is going to care more about your healthcare or your loved one's healthcare than you and your family.
Yes.
So you have to be the advocate, right? So healthcare providers, as kind and loving as we may be, like, you actually are the one who's going to care the most. You have to care more about the healthcare. So you'll have to take some matters into your own hands sometimes, and that's okay.
I love that you brought that up, Natali, too, because I was reading the report that came out as the 2019 Alzheimer's Association report, and they actually had this really great article at the end where apparently primary care physicians, usually it's the PCPs, that are waiting for the family to say, hey, I think something's wrong. And then the family is actually waiting for the PCP to say, hey, I think something's wrong. So then nobody says anything, right? And so it's not addressed. And so I think it is so important for us to be advocates for what's going on, because in a sense, you know, you as the long distance caregiving daughter and your caregiving parent are the experts, because you see this person on a more regular basis. And the forgetful parent is not, you know, trying to be at their best, right? Especially when they go to the doctor. I think, especially in the generation where our parents are from, there's a lot of authority from doctors, and they're always the boss, right? And so there's sort of this unexplained pressure to sort of be the best that you can be. And for that reason, the, you know, primary care physician may not see what your family is seeing.
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of your long distance daughters can relate to it. Like, sometimes they might talk to their parent with dementia, and their parent with dementia seems totally fine on that phone call. And they're wondering, like, why is mom always complaining about dad? Or he seemed totally fine on the phone. So it's really easy sometimes for somebody with dementia or starting to have changes to look totally normal in a conversation or during a quick visit. And it doesn't mean that everything's normal. So it is really easy for these signs and symptoms to go missed by the provider, because they're just not popping up in the session or in that medical appointment. And a lot of times, because dementia isn't just about memory, like, they might be able to, and they might have good language abilities, they might just look totally fine. So it is a member to say, hey, these are some things I'm noticing that I'm concerned about. Can we look into this further?
Awesome. So let's say that we do that first step, Natali, where we get that sort of initial assessment and we get the referral to the neuropsychologist. What's the next step before that appointment with the neuropsychologist? Because I know I talk with some daughters and they say, my parent just didn't even want to go because they know that they're being assessed and they think they're fine, right?
Right. So this could be a challenge for a lot of families, and it's worthwhile to take some time to think about how you might want to handle, like, those challenges. But I mean, if you think about it, like, what person is really going to be eager to say, yeah, I'll go? You think that I have this brain disease that's making me forget things and not be able to do things? Well, sign me up. Like, let me head over. let me tell you, that appointment is not like a pleasurable one. I was on the end of giving all the assessments, and it's not even pleasure. It's not pleasurable for me. Like, it's challenging.
Yeah.
So coming from a place of compassion and understanding that this is like a hard thing, that most people aren't going to be eager to do. But also, your loved one best. There's no one right or wrong way to do it. And you have to go with what feels right for you. I have some family members who just say, hey, we're going to go, the PCP, your doctor wants you to get this special testing, or your doctor has a special appointment for you, or we're just going to do another regular checkup with another doctor, or we're just going to go for another checkup. Like, whatever you can say to get your loved one to go to the hospital or to the clinic in a way that is without as much pushback as possible. Right? So like, what's best. Sometimes you want to make a day out of it and make it not so medical. Like, hey, let's go to lunch at your favorite place. And then as you're like leaving lunch at your favorite place, oh, we have to stop into the hospital. I forgot we have an appointment we need to follow up with. Like, if that feels okay to you, that's okay. I wouldn't really recommend for most people to say, hey, we think you have dementia, this disease that we don't really know much, can't really do much about, and we want to go get you tested for it. Like, that's probably not going to increase your chances of a successful, getting your loved one to willingly get in the car and go to the hospital.
Natali, you talked about having challenges when you were assessing someone. So you have some skills too, smoothing out the situation. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Right. So for the person giving the assessment, we don't normally get a lot of people who are super enthused to be in front of us to do the assessment. So it's not like as soon as your loved one sits down in front of the neuropsychologist or whoever it is, they're going to just jump into, what's today's date? Remember this list of words, repeat these numbers backwards. They're going to spend some time getting to know the person, making them feel comfortable, building rapport, and then get into the testing. And I've had people who are like, I'm fine. I'm not doing this testing. I don't want to do the testing. And if it's somebody who's had experience and specializes in doing dementia assessments, they're going to have their own ways of making that person feel comfortable and trying to get them to stay. I've certainly said, this is going to be a great opportunity for you to show your family just all of the capabilities that you do have. We can let them know, hey, you're doing okay, right? That's what this testing can show. And also for the family members, if you are somebody who feels like you want to let them know what's going on, that it's testing, you don't want to say it's testing for dementia to see what's going on. It's we're just going to get a snapshot on how your brain is doing so that we can do whatever we can to help you or to make it better, right? Because sometimes what neuropsychological testing reveals is that it's not dementia at all, it's depression. And so then that testing can say, oh, you know what? We can do something here. And the testing can also show strengths. You're struggling a little bit with your verbal memory. When people say things to you, it's really hard for you to remember. But when you see something, you're actually do a pretty good job of remember it later when you saw it visually. Right? So kind of highlighting the good that can come from the testing, not that this is just to determine whether you have dementia. It's hey, let's figure out how we can make your brain as healthy as possible.
I love that. And especially if you have a forgetful parent that's really obstinate, or even a caregiving parent that doesn't think that anything's wrong, this is a good way to say well, yeah, and let's you can prove that there's nothing wrong. You know what I mean?
And we want to keep it that way, right? Yeah. You might go to the PCP once a year as your yearly checkup, not because you have this horrible illness, but it's you just want to make sure everything is on track and doing all right. Yeah. And it's really good. It's totally possible that the person might not have really much wrong with them at all. That happens. We test them and we're hey, that's normal for their age and education, or there's just this little, mild problem in this area. And that's great because in a year from now, we can test again and see if it's holding steady or if it's getting worse or maybe even getting better.
Yeah. I talked a little bit about my family that we went to a neuropsychologist before primary care physician, but I'm so glad we did that because there was sort of this mild cognitive impairment that he was diagnosed with. And so that gave us a baseline of, in the future when it did start to progress, that we could see that it was progressing, because I think sometimes the brain scans don't even show anything. And that was the case for us. For the first 3 years, it wasn't showing any change in my dad's brain, but
Right.
We noticed through his behaviors and the symptoms and things like that there was something going on. What if my parent just refuses to be assessed? What can I do in that case?
So it's entirely possible that even with the best approach that you could possibly come up with and the best clinician in front of your loved one with dementia, your loved one just might say, I'm not doing this. And if they're not doing it, you can't force them. So when we think about coming up with a dementia diagnosis, it's never just one piece of information that's giving us that diagnosis. Just like you said, there's brain scans, right? There's psych testing. There's a little quick screening testing that the PCP can do in the office. There's PCP visits and lab testing, and then just reports from family and friends and of what they're noticing and the behavior changes, right? There's so many different pieces to the puzzle that come together to form this diagnosis, and the majority of cases don't have all those pieces. So you might be one of the people who don't have comprehensive neuropsych testing. That's okay. You might be one of the people who don't have brain scans. That's okay. Like, you just do the best that you can with the information that you have, and you work and you say, you know what, with the medical provider, like, this is what we think is going on. We don't have this comprehensive testing, but based on everything else, and we've ruled out every other possible thing, like, this is what we think is happening. And then so you start to work as if like that's what you're working with. And the majority of people don't have all the puzzle pieces.
Yes. And I love how you talk about how each is a piece and you're trying to put the puzzle together, because I think we as long distance daughters focus on what we don't have, but we do have some information just in talking with our forgetful parent on the phone, or if our forgetful parent seems fine, talking with our caregiving parent and, finding out what happened that day that was kind of strange, So
Right.
I think that's really important.
Yeah, because even if you think of a puzzle, like, there can be pieces missing, but you still have the big picture. Like, you still know, hey, that's a house, right? Like, it's kind of the same thing happening here.
Yes, totally. And so what about if the long distance caregiving daughter is not able to come to these appointments in person? I know I have some daughters who are international, and so that's just really difficult in their situation. What could they do to be helpful through the dementia journey and also in this process of assessment and maybe finding someone who could give a good assessment or things like that?
Yeah, there's a lot a long distance daughter can do. So you can attend the appointments virtually, whether it's by telephone or Skype conference. I've had that happen many times. Like, when we're sitting down and giving feedback or recommendations, we're dialing in a number to a loved one who can't make it. They might even be in the same city, but just can't make it. They can't get away from work. So wherever you are in the world, like, you can still attend these appointments. You can help research, like, who's a neuropsychologist in the town that has a good reputation that you want your loved one to go to. You can kind of take that responsibility off of the caregiving parent and research that. So that's kind of like specific to the testing process. But there's also things like, just in terms of being a helpful long distance caregiver, of like ordering groceries online, refilling medications online, helping manage finances online, helping coordinate the follow-up appointments online. Like, don't limit yourself, like, to how helpful you think you can be simply because you're not there physically. There's so much that can be done from far away. And I always like to say, one of the best things a long distance caregiver can do is just to support the caregiving parent, to not jump into feeling like you have to give advice or that this is what they should do. It's really easy when you're removed from the situation and far away to kind of feel like you know what's best sometimes, especially when you're talking to your caregiving parent who seems so overwhelmed and stressed and frustrated, and you just want to say, do this, do this, do this, do this.
Yep.
Yeah. Obviously, like, you can do that and you can help and you can be that kind of direct person, but like, don't forget, like, something that any dementia caregiver cannot have enough of is just support, and just say, Mom, like, you're doing a great job, or this, I can't imagine how hard this must be for you. Like, I'm here for you. Like, and just letting them vent, letting them talk about their stresses without feeling like you have to offer a solution every single time. Right. I think that's kind of the emotional piece that I also want to highlight that any long distance daughter can do.
Yeah. And I think that's really hard for us, speaking as someone who was long distance for 7 years. It's like, we, as much as we're told not to do this and we know we aren't supposed to, like, we're trying to manage our forgetful parents' happiness. We're trying to manage our caregiving parents' happiness. I mean, especially me as an only child, but I've talked to some daughters where that responsibility just falls to them for whatever reason, the siblings aren't involved. And so, I think one of the ways, and the other thing too, is that we feel so much guilt not being there. And so you touched a little bit on this, Natali, and it's something that I actually did for my family, is really doing that research and the legwork and the vetting of these different professionals. And, as you said, finding a neuropsychologist in the area, which is what I did for my parents, and maybe finding a geriatrician if the primary care physician that they're seeing is not really even doing an initial assessment, or really thinks that the person has dementia, in finding a second doctor. Because I think part of the issue that the stress comes from is like, oh my God, I have to stop going to this doctor that we really like, and then I have to find another one that's going to be just as good. It's just like one extra thing that the caregiving parent needs to do. So I think that, the long distance caregiving daughter can actually do this research, do the vetting, come up with 3 recommendations and say, hey, I feel really good about this one, but you make the final decision. I think that helps everyone involved.
Right. And it's not that you can't give advice or do these things and try to help out, but you just want to make sure you're not ignoring like the emotional support as well. And you can even say, like, I'm using the example of like the mom, like your mom being the caregiver, because I know that's the case in your situation, but you could say, Mom, do you want me to just listen to you right now? Or do you want me to let you know what I'm thinking? Like, what do you want? What's best right now for you? Like, let me know. Like, so it doesn't mean like you can't do it ever, but like just kind of being open and letting them know, like, hey, I'm here for you to just listen, or do you want to know what I'm thinking right now, or what steps I'm thinking might help?
I love that. And I wish that I had talked with you before when I was in the, early dementia situation, because I think I could have done that much better. So thank you for that advice, Natali.
Yeah. Don't beat yourself up, right? Like, no, there is no like guidebook. It's like, do this, say this. Like, we're all just doing the best that we can. There's no wrong or right way. It's just the way that you did it. And whatever way you did it, you can't go back and change it and just say, you know what, I did the best that I can. And whatever you did, you were doing from a place of trying to help your mom. Like, how can you go wrong? Like, right? So I get a lot of caregivers who are like, God, I wish I would have watched that video sooner. Or I wish I would have done this differently. It's like, it's okay. Like, beating yourself up, nothing good came from it. Just like guilt, being guilty, like nothing, no good comes from that. It's like, let's move forward from right now. And every decision you made and everything you said, it was all coming from a good place, and you were just doing the best that you can. How can you beat yourself up for that? Like,
yes.
You can't do that.
And that's exactly, like, I'm paying it forward to other daughters because of my experience, because I have that, oh, I wish I did that. So that's sort of the best practices that I'm teaching. And that's what you teach in your channel too, in Careblazers, which we'll get to in just a teeny bit. So what is the one major thing that long distance caregiving daughters can take from this interview about, getting the assessment done and how to be supportive?
So don't be afraid to bring up the topic of assessment with the primary care provider. Don't be afraid to go for a second opinion if you feel like maybe this primary care provider is not taking things seriously. And then just work, like, spending some time with the caregiving parent and you guys talking and preparing ahead of time, like, how can we increase the chances that dad will go to this appointment? How can we increase the chances that when he, we can get him in the car to get him to go? Like, what are your ideas? Like, it's almost like sometimes we don't plan ahead or prepare for some of these difficult situations, and then we're totally frustrated and thrown off guard when they happen. Going back, like, to kind of how we talked in the beginning about, well, how do you want to couch it? How do you want to phrase it? We don't want to say we think something's wrong with your brain and you have dementia, we want to get it tested. It's like, hey, we just want to make sure your brain's as healthy as possible and we're doing everything we can to keep it healthy. Or, hey, we just have another doctor's appointment today we're going to go to. And maybe making it fun, like stopping for a favorite treat on the way home or on the way there. So really just taking time to prepare for some of the challenges and pushback you might get.
Yes, because as we're talking about puzzle pieces, your caregiving parent has a puzzle piece that they can share, and then you have a puzzle piece that you can share and, put together somewhat of a big picture so you can kind of figure out what to anticipate and really have the best experience.
Right. And it's okay. Like if your loved one, especially because we're talking about getting somebody in the early stages in to have testing, if your loved one is really feeling nervous and hesitant, like you don't have to feel like you have to push and say, but you have to go, it's important. You can say, yeah, I get it. It must be scary. Tell me about it. Like, what are you worried is going to happen? Like, like just sometimes people are afraid to like open up that conversation. But when you do, you kind of, the pushback and the arguments and the resistance start to go away, and you kind of just like get to acknowledge like, yeah, that is a scary thing, but what I'm hoping is that we find some things that can help make you better, is that we can help, make sure that we, that you stay as good as possible for as long as possible. Like that's our goal here.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Natali, for being in this interview and being my guest expert. And where can my viewers find you?
So I have a website. It's www.careblazers.com. If you go there, there is a free Careblazers survival guide that you can download. It'll be delivered immediately to your inbox. And it's got my favorite tips and strategies to help family members manage all of the most difficult challenges of caring for a loved one with dementia. There's also a link on that website to my TV channel on YouTube, where I've got hundreds of videos of all different kinds of challenging situations and how you can help manage those.
Awesome. Yes. And I have downloaded the survival guide, and it's been super helpful in my situation. And also too, I forgot to mention earlier in this video that I interviewed for Natali. So she interviewed me, I guess, about home care. And so I will put that video in after this interview if you want to check that out, because I also have a free resource there too. So
absolutely.
Thank you again so much, Natali. It was really great having you on my channel. And thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that this has been helpful with the assessment process, and I hope you subscribe below, and I will put Natali's website in the description. Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you, Laura.